Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to why living in Canada has become almost impossible. I've never been to Canada. I've got a cousin that lives in Canada, but I don't really speak to him that much. I'm guessing this is to do with maybe the cost of living. I'm guessing it's as crazy as it is in the UK. I think it's happening everywhere, to be honest with you. But maybe, I think from the sounds of it, it's like at an absolutely insane level in Canada, probably even worse off than, you know, the other sort of like highly developed countries.
The skyrocketing cost of living.
I was skipping meals because I was struggling to afford my food and my rent.
2 million Canadians had to use the food bank in 1 month alone.
No wonder crime is rocketing after 8 years of Justin Trudeau.
Canada is worse than you think. Just 2 years ago, a simple two-bedroom apartment in Toronto cost on average 2,400 Canadian dollars. Today, that's 3,300, an average increase of 25% per year. And that's not an outlier.
I just found out my rent's gonna be increased from $2,100 a month to $2,400 a month for a one-bedroom condo in Toronto.
In most Canadian cities, you would need to earn at least double the minimum wage to afford a one-bedroom apartment, and you can forget about buying. In major cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the minimum income that's required to qualify for a mortgage is double or triple the median household income. This makes buying even unattainable for the top 10% of earners. There is a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, and now even an immigration crisis.
I feel like I hear this story for like every country, every developed country in the world. They all face the same problems, don't they?
This is a real change from the Canada I know and admire. What has happened?
It's time for a change in this country, my friends, a real change!
This is how living in Canada became impossible, with hindsight.
Canadians from all across this great country sent a clear message tonight. It's time for a change in this country, my friends, a real change.
Justin Trudeau was first elected in 2015 with a message of positivity.
This is what positive politics can do.
Honestly, man, these days I try not to pay attention to politics because they all lie. They all make these big promises, but rarely keep them.
Built his campaign on hope, and the media often drew comparisons with Obama in the United States.
I want to say this. Many of you have worried that Canada has lost its compassionate and constructive voice in the world. Well, we're back.
On his first day in office, he entered a Montreal metro station to take selfies with commuters. The exchange went viral. The atmosphere was exuberant. There was a feeling of hope and positivity. Trudeau had the second highest approval rating of any new prime minister in Canada's history. To understand how his approval ratings have turned around so dramatically, why Canada is in a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, and most surprisingly is now struggling with immigration, we need to go back in history. Canada is a nation of immigrants. In the mid-1800s, the population of Canada was almost entirely concentrated on the east coast, along the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes. To its west and north lay a vast and sparsely populated area that they wanted to populate. They used immigration as a tool to build their country. They attracted new people with a comprehensive marketing campaign. Build your nest in Western Canada was the message, calling it the new El Dorado.
Honestly, I feel like almost jealous of the people of like these generations, like the older, like, you know, the people that just had the opportunity to go and discover somewhere entirely brand new, you know, completely non-developed, you know, they can just claim it's theirs, whereas we don't really have that opportunity, you know, like just here you go, have some free land, build a farm on it or whatever you want. Like, we don't really have those opportunities, my generation.
Boatloads of prospective migrants arrived in Canada and were vetted by migration officers. They were particularly eager to attract talented farmers. They could help Canada's westward expansion by settling uninhabited areas. They built villages and turned them into cities, attracting commerce and industry, over time strengthening Canada's grip on the West. By 1920, population centres had emerged all along Canada's southern border. They grew from 3 million inhabitants to 9 million. These immigrants were selected on merit, but also on race. Canada wanted to maintain the status of a white man's country. But after World War II, these discriminatory...
It's quite interesting because I feel like the people like native to Canada are like, they're like Cherokee, aren't they? You know, which... You know, hearing that they wanted to keep Canada a white man's country, I just find a bit bizarre, you know, considering the people that were originally there weren't white.
Tory practices came under scrutiny. Canada started to build its modern immigration system. This was based on a points system. Prospective immigrants were scored based on their age, education, training, and language skills. The basic philosophy is that immigrants are selected based on their merit and what they can contribute to the country. This system is still in place in Canada today, making it the oldest immigration system of any country in the OECD. An early challenge was that an increasingly large percentage of newcomers were family members. In 1971, economic migrants made up 73% and family members 21%. But a decade later, this had turned around. Family members were seen as unproductive consumers of welfare benefits, and this prompted the government to make entry requirements stricter. By 1995, the percentage had dropped to 36%. Canada vested a lot of power in the federal executive branch of government, which makes it possible to respond quickly to unwanted flows of migrants. They kept identifying weak spots and making improvements, and by the early 2000s, the system was hailed around the world as one of the best. Even Donald Trump had good things to say about it.
Nations around the world, like Canada, have a merit-based immigration system.
But what was most impressive were Canada's exceptionally high levels of public acceptance. Immigration, until recently, wasn't a controversial issue. In 2018, 2/3 of Canadians believed that immigration was a good thing for their country.
From what I've seen, immigration becomes a real issue when the cost of living in a certain place goes up. You know, when renting becomes super expensive, it's harder to find a good job. Immigration usually takes the blame for that, even though largely it's not often the fault of the immigrants. It's the fault of like massive private equity companies buying up thousands of homes at a time, never planning on selling them again, which obviously reduces the amount of properties available on the market.
The highest level of any country in the OECD. But that wouldn't last.
Canadians are almost universally positively inclined towards immigration. We know that immigration is a source of strength and resilience and growth for our communities, and that's a wonderful thing we should be very, very proud of.
Public opinion on immigration has shifted dramatically during the last years, from people feeling overwhelmingly supportive to most people feeling concerned. During the first 4 years under Trudeau, the population grew at a record pace, mostly because of immigration. And it slowed during the pandemic. And that's where the problem started. Canada was facing a host of challenges. One of them was a shortage of workers. There are difficulties in all major sectors, from construction to healthcare. Companies were just unable to find the people with the right skills.
It's simple to me. Canada needs more people.
This was the new Minister of Immigration.
Canadians understand the need to continue to grow our population if we're going to meet the needs of the labour force.
Fraser, like many before him, saw immigration as a tool to fix specific issues. The worker shortage, but also demographics.
You know, immigration in Canada is not just something that we do, it's who we are. It's who we've always been.
All across the Western world, the population is aging, and that is an issue. But in Canada, it is extreme. In 1971, there were 7 people of working age for each senior. In 2012, this was down to 4. The projection is that there will only be 2 workers for every retiree by 2036.
This is a serious problem, like that people haven't yet realized. Who's going to pay the pensions? Like once, you know, people retire, pensions are usually paid from the taxes of working people. So if you don't have enough people working, Who's going to pay for these pensions? That's why a lot of these countries are importing people, because they need workers. Like that's the truth of it.
The number of Canadians that are over the age of 75 will double over the next 2 decades, while fewer people are entering the workforce.
If we don't do something to correct this demographic trend, the conversation we're going to have 10 or 15 years from now won't be about labor shortages. It's going to be about whether we have the economic capacity to continue to fund schools and hospitals and public services that I think we too often take for granted.
This inspired a radical new immigration plan. In 2022, Canada had set a record population growth, and they announced to welcome 465,000 permanent residents in 2023, 485,000 in 2024, and 500,000 in 2025.
Wow, pretty big
and we
numbers.
are staring at one of the greatest economic opportunities of our time when people around the world are looking to move, and Canada has become the world's top destination for people who are thinking of leaving their country of origin to pursue economic opportunity elsewhere.
They saw immigration as a race for global talent, and they had every intent on winning. Their target was to have economic migrants make up 60% of newcomers, an ambitious goal. And they particularly targeted workers in sectors with the highest demand, like...
But the issue is, when you bring in a lot of people, professionals, it kind of suppresses the wage growth, the salary growth, unless the amount of jobs increases at the same rate or higher than the amount of workers increases, you're going to have more demand than supply for jobs. It's a catch-22 situation. I don't know how you really solve this.
Healthcare, skilled trades, manufacturing, and technology. But when these plans were announced, immigration offices were already 2 million resident applications behind on their work, and there was already a shortage of housing.
When you talk about the housing crisis that we're facing, which we are facing, one of the limits on creating more housing is the challenges on having enough construction workers.
But Trudeau and his cabinet members saw immigration as the solution, not the problem. And in 2023, Canada's population grew with the fastest rate in almost 70 years. This was the fastest growing population of any country in the OECD. More extreme voices like the Century Initiative lobby to grow Canada's population to 100 million by the end of the century.
From 40 million to 100 million, so more than doubling it in just over 70 years.
Was endorsed by a former prime minister, and lobbyists included several advisors to Justin Trudeau and his cabinet members.
We have a population that is aging. We need people to arrive with their talents, with their hopes, with their dreams, with their capacities to work hard, to build our communities, to build our future.
Public opinion was shifting. Whereas in 2022, 27% of people believed that there was too much migration to Canada, in 2023, this was up to 51%, and in 2024, to 58%.
All right, well, behind me is the Take Back Canada March Against Mass Immigration.
In July 2024, there were protests.
There's a lot of disaffected Canadians here who feel like the government has not been listening to them.
This was an unusual sight in Canada.
And what happens to the election in 2025? Is mass immigration going to become the main issue in the election, or are politicians going to try to run away from it like they seem to be doing right now?
Immigration, I do think, it can't be limitless immigration, because ultimately a place can only hold so many people, without starting to crumble. Oh man, how would you solve this? Obviously, Canada needs to build more homes. It needs to build more homes like now, because if the cost of, because usually someone's home is the most expensive thing that they pay for. If buying a home, renting a home becomes more affordable, then I think there will be less sort of animosity towards immigrants. I do believe that.
In 2025, there are federal elections in Canada, and Trudeau might lose his seat.
2 broccoli heads was $11.
Whoa, that's insane. Broccoli here, 1 head of broccoli, it's like £1. £1.50 tops. $11 is insane.
44 cents. $11.44 at Save On Foods in Langley.
What?
We have a serious problem here in Canada. Just came to $218. How? How?
The government likes to publish figures that show how the economy is growing. This is technically true, but the growth is primarily fueled by a growing population. Per capita growth is down, along with individual living standards.
This apartment is 750 square feet, and I pay $4,300 a month.
People are working 3 jobs just to live in this city. It's actually crazy, and they're still struggling to pay their bills.
There is a clear mismatch between how fast Canada's population is growing and how long they need to supply housing and service infrastructures like healthcare and schools. This affects all layers of society, but this is most acutely visible in the cost of housing.
Okay, we need to talk rent increases because this is getting out of hand.
Do you know what the sad truth is? Wealthy people won't care. Like the politicians won't really care because they don't feel like they live in some kind of community, some gated community somewhere. You know, they send their kids to private schools. They don't care, unfortunately. That's the sad truth.
Would you pay $800 a month to share a bed with a stranger? That's what this Vancouver listing is offering.
The most vulnerable people are people with little to spare, like students. A story broke about 25 students that were living in one basement in Brampton, and it went viral. The mayor of the city responded that they've seen cases like these on a regular basis.
Like this landlord who's renting out 6 beds on the floor with dividers between them for $325 each.
Jesus. Man, this is terrible. This is terrible.
The number of temporary residents, which includes temporary workers but also international students, have increased dramatically. In 2022, they numbered 1.4 million. And in 2024, this had doubled to 2.8 million. Public opinion had now turned against Canadian immigration policies, and for the first time, it had become a controversial topic. Trudeau, with elections coming up, needed to act.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is promising a massive federal program to deal with the housing crisis in Canada.
So today, we are releasing the most comprehensive and ambitious housing plan ever seen in Canada.
He put Sean Fraser, former Minister of Immigration, in charge of housing.
I know we're going to solve the housing crisis because I know what Canadians are capable of.
These decisions were vilified in the comment section on YouTube. It's crazy that people believe the guy that got us into this mess is the guy that's gonna get us out. Too little, too late. You cannot be the solution to the problem you created.
The reality is different parts of the country have seen different challenges. In addition to population growth, there have been supply chain constraints that have driven up the cost of building. We're trying to address a 30-year lack of investment in affordable housing, and we're soon going to hit a bottleneck with the productive capacity of the Canadian workforce to build the homes we need.
Fraser is in an awkward position. Perhaps letting in 9 million new Canadians before homes were built for them had a little to do with this problem. A majority of people now disagreed with immigration policies. They were angry and frustrated by the cost of living crisis, and immigrants felt that they were unfairly portrayed as the cause of the problem.
They miscalculated how much immigrants they want. They miscalculated how much housing they have, how much they could accommodate over here, and now they are blaming all it on us.
Trudeau's approval rating dropped in September 2024 to just 33%, and only 26% favored him as the Prime Minister. He had to turn this.
When's the next Canadian election? Because, I mean, if it's anytime soon, like, easy money to probably bet on Justin Trudeau to not win again. Or is he term limited? Has he already served the maximum amount of time he can?
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. In a moment, Minister Miller will be detailing our immigration plan. Before he does, I want to say a few things. Canadians are justifiably proud of our immigration system. It has made our economy the envy of the world. It's how we've built strong, diverse communities. It's how we've demonstrated that differences can and must be a source of strength, not a source of weakness for communities and society. Today, we're announcing that we will reduce the number of immigrants we bring in over the next 3 years.
Wow, so it finally sort of sunk in.
Which will result in a pause in the population growth over the next 2 years.
Trudeau announced that they'll change course. to lower the number of new arrivals, to slow population growth. He admitted he was wrong.
We didn't get the balance quite right.
When he took office, there was already a 3-decade-long lack of investment in affordable housing. There were building challenges and supply chain issues, but as PM, he bears the burden of responsibility. It was his choice to allow entry to such large numbers of immigrants, growing the population and adding...
Just looking at this graph, it's just insane that they did this. Like, I don't see an issue with a slow and steady growth like we see here, but this is just wild. Like, this is insane. So since 2015, it's like ×6 in number. Like, that's just wild.
Pressure to the housing market. The affordability of housing and the cost of living in general are very visible signs of a deteriorating living standard. In 2019, 19% of Canadians felt that Canada was extremely unequal. That is now up to 38%. To the question whether the cost of living is now worse, the number rose from 66% in 2019 to 84% in 2024. And I'm still just scratching the surface. Canada. This was a real change. I hope that you learned something or found this video entertaining.
Wow. It's there's a lot of parallels between what's happening in Canada to what's happening here in England, the UK at large, America, Germany, all over Europe. It's I don't know how they solve this. To be honest, what I deep down think we're seeing is sort of late stage capitalism. And I think I like the capitalist system for sure, but I don't think you can have unlimited growth in like infinite growth in a finite system with finite resources. Like, you just cannot expect economies to just keep on growing indefinitely. You know, it just doesn't, it's not possible, because land, you can't just build more houses endlessly. And I think what Canada probably should look into is trying to build homes that don't require huge amounts of workforce, like modular homes. I've been reading about homes that they're kind of built in factories in sections, and then they are constructed, you know, kind of almost like Lego. You know, that could be a way to increase the amount of affordable housing, which could kind of take a bit of the pressure off of the housing market and slow the growth of rent prices and housing prices. But yeah, like, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I don't know how they solve this issue. Like, Canadians watching this, and Americans, to be honest, anybody who lives in a country that's dealing with these issues, let me know your thoughts and possible solutions. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoy my videos, please help me out by liking and subscribing.